Hi, I'm Dr. Jeff Pettis. I'm an entomologist, and I've worked with honeybees for over 40 years, and I've worked with USDA as an agricultural research scientist for over 20 years.
All right. So I'm really glad to be here with you, Dr. Pettis and Justin, to talk about what we have kind of recapped is honeybees are seeing alarming increases in what were already bad losses. So the last couple of years have been record and potentially devastating in that we're seeing over 50% losses, which now makes it almost impossible to keep up with. We've talked about the impact into our food security and why everybody should care about this, whether you're into managed bees or just worried about natural pollinators. And we've talked about some of the limitations with Varroa continuing to be one of the key stressors in all of this. So tell me, Jeff, or Dr. Pettis, I'm so sorry. Tell me, Dr. Pettis, if you could magically wave a wand and have a solution for Varroa, what would that look like?
Okay, so Jeff's fine, by the way. So I go back to the commercial beekeepers who have been telling me this for my whole time with USDA and beyond. They want a Varroa thing that's very effective, 95% effective, doesn't cause residues, costs 25% an application, and self-destructs after it, so they never have to go back to the hive. And we've kind of worked towards that, but nothing we've had is like that. The chemicals all come in strip form. You're supposed to go back after 45 days and remove them. Second trip to the hive is costly, so beekeepers don't want to spend extra time going back to the colony. The two oxalic or the two acids that we have applicator issues. So yeah, there's just there's a lot of things that about the current miticides and mite control options that we have, which are not in line with what we'd like to have, shall we say.
So we want it for free. We want it to work really well. We want it to be safe, and we want it to disappear after it's done. So it sounds like a pretty tough road. So Justin, before you get into what you've been working on a little bit, because I think the audience would love to hear about this, a little bit of background. What have you been doing that kind of caused you to come down this path of bees? Maybe a little bit about your background in killing pathogens.
Sure. So been working on primarily water pathogens the bulk of my career, and worked on technologies to control pathogens in water and in other applications, and that sort of led to looking at how to control these pathogens on live plants. We actually founded Terra Vera because we had discovered a way of generating some really safe, benign chemistries electrolytically that are really in tune with mammal immune responses. Basically, we figured out a way to mimic a response that all mammals have as part of their immune system in the presence of invading microorganisms. But we figured out a way to generate it cost effectively and outside of cells at really high concentration. So we originally founded Terra Vera to go after plant microbes, and developed a lot of systems and chemistries that work quite well there, but discovered that if we generated the chemistry in a very specific way, it could have a negative effect on spider mites, and that led us to looking at other places where mites will be an issue, and really has led to us focusing almost exclusively on controlling Varroa mites in apiculture for a little bit over I guess it's a little over a year now. We've looked at that as well as other pathogens in beehives.
So I've heard you refer to a little bit of a post-it note moment, or sometimes you talk about how superglue was developed for one purpose and then ended up finding a very different application. Is that kind of what's happened with?
It's a fair analogy, yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. So you and Dr. Pettis have been working on this solution that seems to promise at least some of the things you talked about, Dr. Pettis. So let's kind of break them down a little bit. So when we first started talking about the use of ApiVera on colonies, the notion was originally around Varroa control. So let's start with that. So what is the data suggesting so far with respect to ApiVera being able to help with Varroa? And I'll ask each of you the same question.
Sure. So it's actually very promising. My first concern was making sure that it was safe for adult bees and the brood. And we did some initial testing in cages and out in whole colonies, and it doesn't seem to affect the brood or adult bees. I mean, it seems to be safe for bees. Then you couple that with the fact that we can kill mites really effectively in the lab, and we're working to make it more efficient in the hive. The problem with the hive is it's so complex, and you've got 40,000 bees, and we're working on getting the penetration into around the entire worker bees and making it more effective. But it's very promising, and because of the safety on bees, it seems like a great solution to our Varroa mite problem.
So, Justin, talk about what you've seen with respect to the chemistry's ability to kill Varroa, and then we'll come back to the safety issue in more detail.
Sure. Our depending on the specific chemistry, we've seen anywhere from, and typically when we fog a hive and we do mite board treatments kind of before and after, so 24 hours prior to treatment and then 24 hours after treatment. Excuse me, guys, my allergies are killing me. But typically, if we see if we do a 24-hour mite board before treatment and 24 hours afterwards, we see somewhere between a 6 to 8x typically increase, 6 to 8-fold increase in mite drop in the 24 hours afterwards. We're working to still improve that. We do know that we have a few levers to do that, but for now, the technology that we do have does seem to have quite a dramatic effect on Varroas in the hive.
So let's come back to the notion of safety, because it's not just about safety for the bees, and it sounds like you guys have convinced yourselves at these concentrations that are effective against the mite, we're not seeing any real mortality on the bee, and that's an oversimplification, right, Dr. Pettis? Because you have brood, you have queen development, so you have different aspects of this. So could you talk about what you've kind of done to validate for yourself that this is not solving one problem but creating another, I guess?
Yeah. So there's the different parts of the hive that could be affected if we're fogging. I mean, eventually we're going to get material throughout the hive. So you have to think about young larvae that are developing in the cells. You have to think about the worker bees. Is it going to affect their longevity? The queen is vital to the colony. So all these things have to be taken into consideration. And we've done basically cage bee trials in the laboratory and directly expose them by fog or direct application of the material. We're not seeing direct mortality with the adult worker bees. We've also done some limited trials in Georgia with queen rearing, and it looked extremely safe for young developing queens. And that could use more fleshing out, but the initial trials look really great for queen rearing situations. And then, on human safety, we have, at this point, we have virtually no concerns on human safety. So I'm very impressed with the safety issue thing relative to our use in honeybee colonies.
Yeah. So Justin, could you talk a little bit more about that? So why do you feel so confident, beyond the efficacy issues and safety for the bees, why do you feel confident that this is safe for the beekeeper and quite frankly for the environment as well? What are your thoughts on those topics?
Sure. So what the chemistry essentially is an activated amino acid. Amino acids are the building blocks of all life, of all protein. There's several hundred of them that occur in nature. A little over 30 are used a lot, or used really, really commonly in mammal cells and in insects. And the amino acids that we picked are ones that are known to be safe.
Yeah, I don't know if you guys want to dive into the story, but I recall, Dr. Pettis, when you had a visit to Justin's lab, I think we end up tasting some of these formulations. Could you guys share a little bit more about that experience and how that might have affected your view on this? So first of all, Justin, what did you feed Dr. Pettis, and Jeff, what was your experience with it?
Yeah, so again, all of the precursors are food grade amino acids. So some of them taste kind of like very, very sour. Some of them taste almost like nothing, have a slight taste or a slight sweet taste. And so we basically tasted all the precursors as we went and made up some chemistry and activated it. And there are carbohydrates, there are some sugars in our bee blend as well, or at least in our nutrient version of the blend that the bees seem to consume and seem to enjoy. I don't know, Jeff, if there's anything else you wanted to say on that.
No, first of all, I had to take a leap of faith when I came out to the lab in New Mexico and just said, yeah, you mean I really can't taste this stuff. So because I'd seen it kill mites right before that, and so just tasting them, yeah, it was everything from a little bit sour to a little bit sweet, but nothing offensive, and I survived it all. So it was safe in my regard. Yeah, no, nothing else at this moment on that. Just that, I mean, safety for the applicator is a huge issue, and then safety for the bees is another issue. And then we have to kill something. It has to be work to kill Varroa in this case.
Yeah, so we definitely don't recommend, I think, any of us that people, even if it tastes like Sour Patch Kids, that they go around and eat this stuff. But so Justin, a little bit more, if you could, on this topic. So it seems counterintuitive to me, and I think most folks, that something that is safe is so effective, and yet, the same chemistry that you and Dr. Pettis that may have tasted, and it's all food grade ingredients, if I understand it correctly, and then you can see under a microscope a Varroa being inactivated or die, I guess, within a couple of minutes, and yet it's safe for people and the bee itself. Could you talk more about why that is and how that is that's possible?
Sure. Again, we're mimicking something that our immune systems already do, and so our immune systems take what they have, salts, amino acids, sugars, that sort of stuff, and combine them in different ways to form chemistries that are not good for invading microbes. Beyond that, we have there's a lot of testing that's been done. We have applied these into the field for years. There's a lot of literature on using this and very similar chemistries that exist. It's been used. Very similar chemistries have been used and studied for cystic fibrosis treatment, COVID treatment of wounds, treatment of dental appliances or in the mouth. And so it's there's lots of years of safety data that basically shows that this chemistry is pretty compatible with especially more complicated organisms like ourselves, and bees for that matter.
So in that way, is it similar to formic or oxalic acid, which we've talked about before, in terms of being safe and organic, or how would you compare and contrast?
No, I would say it's quite a bit different than oxalic and formic. First and foremost, no PPE is really required when you're using it. The mechanism by which this chemistry works is it's a very low strength oxidant, so high dose, low strength oxidant, and so what it tries to do is rob electrons from whatever it comes into contact with. So for organisms like Varroa that have a very high soft body tissue to the rest of their tissue ratio, it can have a really negative, very quick effect on them, whereas bees and humans and other more complicated organisms can tolerate it quite well.
So deadly for Varroa, but safe for humans. And then from an environmental standpoint, one of the, not just environment in general, but in the hive as well, Dr. Pettis was pretty clear to articulate earlier that accumulation of any compounds can be problematic. So have you guys tested for that or thought through what are the residuals and what's that likely to do over time?
So again, what's left behind after we fog these chemistries into the hive or place these chemistries into the hive are amino acids that the bees can then consume and use, and sugars that they can consume and use. There's really no measurable residual of anything left in the hive, at least that we've been able to measure thus far, against the background of honey and wax and everything, all the other organic stuff that goes on in the hive.
And some of the residues that we were talking about are the three synthetic miticides that have been used historically, they build up in wax. Formic acid actually has almost no residue, similar to the product we're talking about, ApiVera. But oxalic acid, we're finding maybe having detrimental effects that we really didn't understand. And part of that could be due to it forms a small crystal, and maybe that persists over time. And while we thought oxalic acid was fairly benign, we're finding out differently now that its repeated use might be problematic.
So if I understand what you've created and what you've been testing, Dr. Pettis, is these formulations aren't just effective on the Varroa and then safe for the beekeeper, they're actually leaving behind some potentially beneficial amino acids for the bees themselves. Could you talk about?
Yeah, I mean that when I fog the hives, first of all, there's I mean, any beekeeper will know when you open a hive, they kind of become alarmed, and we smoke them sometimes to calm them down. As you start to fog the hive, the fog, it creates a calming thing, and maybe that's just because they're stopping to consume part of the product or whatever. I don't know, but the bees become very calm as they're fogged, and I haven't seen anything negative. And you're right, the residues that are left behind are in some cases sugars or nutrients that they can use.
Awesome. So we've also talked a little bit about how it's not just the Varroa, right? The Varroa is not killing the bee per se. It's weakening the bee, making it more susceptible to other stressors, be it pesticides or, exacerbates nutrition issues or makes it easier for pathogens, viruses, bacterial, etc. So what are the likely impacts, if any, that ApiVera might have on not just Varroa, but other aspects of colony health?
Well, it has, because it's, as Justin pointed out, it's a weak oxidant. It has the capability, and we've done some initial testing. It has the capability to destroy some of the bacterial and fungal pathogens in the hive, perhaps some of the viruses that are in used bee equipment. So there's a lot of promise there in reducing the overall, let's just say, pathogen load within the colony.
So, Justin, any more thoughts on what you hope to see or what you expect to see over time as we continue to do more evaluation?
No, Jeff said that really well. It should be effective. I mean, Varroas are one of the more difficult to inactivate organisms in a hive. Fungal pathogens, bacteria, viruses. If they come in contact with any oxidant, they are, especially at the levels that we are applying this, they should be easy to inactivate.
So
I'll give you a natural thing that bees do. That bees naturally use propolis, which is plant resin, and they line the hive with it. And part of that is just to reduce that pathogen load, viruses, bacteria, fungi. And I think the ApiVera product is working like the same way. It should. We know that some of the fungal pathogens, bacterial pathogens, they're always present in the hive. It's not until the hive gets a little bit stressed or weakened that those can be problematic. So they're always present in every hive. It's not like hives are clean or dirty. They're there. It's just a question of at what level. And I think the ApiVera product could help reduce that level, maybe to help eliminate some of these brood diseases that we have.
So it might not just be biomimicry of mammalian immune systems, Justin. It might be actually a little bit of biomimicry of what bees already do and part of their natural defense. It sounds like. I mean, it might be oversimplification.
And anecdotally, hives that we've treated, several weeks in a row, kind of one time or two times a week, they show a much higher. They seem to have a lot more propolis in them. It's kind of a qualitative observation, but it was pretty clear, kind of across the board.
Interesting observation. More work probably needed there. So one of the it's been many months, maybe even a year, since we started doing some work with you, Dr. Pettis, and I know you. I don't know if you're from Missouri, but you're certainly a show me kind of person. You kind of did some tests on your original on your hives originally to see that it was safe for the bees and you're getting efficacy. But even in those early days, we could see under the scope the mite again becoming inactive or dying within literally minutes of exposure to the chemistry. And what you've kind of talked both about is this notion of how do you get this throughout the hive and fogging. So Justin, could you talk about that as a challenge? I know that Dr. Pettis from the onset said, okay, this looks promising in the lab and on the scope, but how do you translate that to the hive? And that's presented, I think, more than a small challenge. So could you talk about what you've done and where you stand on that?
Sure. The as Dr. Pettis mentioned earlier, the hive is extremely complicated when you think about trying to force force a chemistry force a chemistry in it to inactivate organisms like this. There's lots of nooks and crannies. There's lots of places, sort of for the mites and the to hide. And so we have to figure out a way to get it all the way, because it can't inactivate, or it can't have an effect on what it doesn't touch. And so a lot of our work has been on optimizing the size of the particles of fogging that go into the system, as well as how do we force them through the hive? How do we set the fans up to blow them, to blow that fog through the hive? I think we're getting pretty close to a really good solution. We still have a ways to go there.
Along that line, just because it's a contact, as Justin pointed out, because it's contact, that's the trick, is getting equal distribution within the hive to effectively kill the Varroa and the other issue, and this is always with Varroa control, about 70% of the mites are hidden in the brood at any one time. So we're only killing we call them phoretic mites, 30% that are out on adult bees. So there would be a timing to reapply it right now. Maybe we'll come up with the magic way of getting it to penetrate the cappings. But at this point, yeah, we're killing the phoretic mite in the hive.
So what are your thoughts on that, Justin, in terms of treatment times and the potential to get beneath the brood cap?
There's some ways that we believe we're going to be able to get the chemistry to penetrate the brood cap and be effective under there. Those are under development. The current technology only works on mites that are outside of the brood cap.
Yeah. And then what does that mean for treatment?
What do you mean?
Like, this is not a one and done. This is over.
Right. So that means you're looking at treating our current regimen that we're talking about is once a week for 3 to 5 weeks, depending on the infestation. We've gotten hives under control in 3 weeks if they were kind of moderately infected or not infected that much. Ones that seem to have a lot more infection, though, you have to hit them a couple extra weeks.
Got it. And what about the notion, and we've talked about this with oxalic and some of the other treatments, one of the reasons we have resistance to amitraz is overtreatment. Do you see, either of you, an issue with too much of a good thing, that overtreatment can lead to problems in ApiVera, at least what we're learning so far? I'll start with you, Dr. Pettis.
So fortunately, I think the ApiVera product is acting exactly like formic acid and or maybe oxalic acts, in that it's causing physical harm to the mite, and the synthetic chemicals act on the nervous system. They disrupt maybe, and there's some enzymes that are important in the nerve transmission. They block them, and the mite dies. So those mechanisms, the mite can develop resistance to. Formic acid, so far, we've never seen resistance, and I think the ApiVera product would go right along there. You can't, never say never with insects, but so far we haven't seen it, and a lot of people are using a lot of formic acid. So I don't think overuse or repeated use of the ApiVera product would be a problem because of the mode of action. Yeah.
And Justin, what about you? Have you done some testing to see? Can you do too much?
You can, but if you do too much, it'll mean that you drowned your bees. You put too much liquid in, and we've treated 2 to 3 times a week. Where a hive really didn't even have enough time to dry out after putting the fog into it. The bees seem to not care for that too much, but they're not. We didn't lose any hives doing that.
I know we're talking predominantly about today's threats, which are Varroa mites and then some of the subsequent diseases. What about Tropiolapis mite and any data or indication there from either of you so far?
Well, I know I've seen Dr. Ramsey did a limited trial where at least he using the fog, the Tropicolaps might die as fast as Varroa, perhaps faster because it's a little bit less sclerotized. It has less armament, shall we say. It's also a little bit smaller than Varroa. So you could think of it body mass that it would be even more vulnerable. And Tropicolaps is an exotic mite that's in Asia, but now moving into Europe, and we're concerned about it. So it'd be nice to have a product that kills Tropicolaps as well.
Justin, anything to add to that?
Nope, that's perfect.
Awesome. So let's kind of recap. So your ideal product from yourself and the commercial beekeepers, Dr. Pettis, is it should be effective. We seem to have efficacy against Varroa as well as the potential against some of these other pathogens and diseases. You want to leave no residual behind, and that seems to be a positive. You want to be safe for the bee and the beekeeper. So far we seem to be hitting most of these. The one we haven't got is have you managed to make this so where it's going to be available for free, Justin?
No, 25 cents. They were willing to pay 25 cents. They said
25 cents.
Yeah.
No, it's not free.
Yeah. No, but the fact that you don't have to go back and remove anything is huge.
Yeah.
Because the labor cost to go back and do something. Now we do have this labor cost of going back and reapplying right now, but if it's non-residue forming and effective, I think they can work it into their rotation scheme. So yeah, but no, it can't be free. I mean, come on. Yeah.
So Justin, what are your thoughts on both costs of the product or treatment, and then how it integrates into the labor component and the time component for beekeepers?
Yeah, there's a couple ways that I think about it. If you look back to our field trial last year, we did a pretty rigorous field trial. All of the hives that we treated with Terra Vera at the end of the field trial made it through the winter. So it had 100% survivability rate through the winter. If you really think about and look, it was a small field trial. It's not statistically significant in terms of the number of data points, but it does tell you something. If you could get anywhere close to that in terms of not having to replace your hives every year, especially with some of the loss rates that we've seen over the last year or so, that's really a way to think about the value that this chemistry or that this approach could add. Given that it provides a nutritional benefit to the bees, helps control varroas, helps control other diseases in the hive, it's not a sort of one value proposition product. And so if I look at it from both of those perspectives, I wouldn't expect it to be the same price as just say a Varroa treatment. By the same token, I wouldn't expect it to only do what a Varroa treatment would do.
So more value and just overall impact to the beekeepers' time and labor. What are your thoughts there?
No, absolutely. So overall hive health is sort of the target of this chemistry and this application, and we absolutely have seen pretty dramatic differences between hives that have been consistently treated with ApiVera solution as opposed to control hives that are not.
Got it.
Another quick comment,
Yeah.
Carlos, if I can. If
Of
you
course.
think about the beekeeper that's already losing 50% or up to 70%, and if we reduce the pathogen load, reduce the Varroa, and create a healthier hive, whatever the cost of the product, I mean, the cost of replacing those colonies is huge these days. So that from the beekeeper's perspective, we have to prove this, but from the beekeeper's perspective, if they can keep more hives alive, it's worth quite a bit.
Yeah, we kind of look at it as total cost of ownership or total cost of investment. It's not just the product; it's the overall impact. So this is probably a good place to wrap this segment up, and maybe in the future segments we'll talk a little bit about best methods for use of ApiVera or in general treating hives, kind of with the idea that an ounce of prevention is worth a ton of cure, I think is the saying.